I'm live, and hold on. Excuse me. Oh, yes, okay, so we are live again. Hi, I'm Rafe Beckley. I'm an audiobook narrator. I go live 4 or 5 times a week, and you can watch and listen to me recording audiobooks, warts and all. I also narrate as Piers Ryman, and we do a lot of audiobook box sets. Currently, I am narrating book 4 in a 5-book box set of Pride and Prejudice variations. This one is Married for Revenge by Harriet Knowles. If you've not come across Pride and Prejudice variations, say it right, before, they are Darcy and Elizabeth and all the characters from Pride and Prejudice, but getting to their happy ever after ending a different way. I think they're rather jolly good fun. So, generally speaking, if people kind of drop by during the live, sometimes they'll stick a question in the chat, and I'll answer that in between chapters. If you're watching this as a recording, then feel free to comment on it if there's anything you want to know, and I will answer it there and or address it in my next live session. Okay, so I always at this point share my screen. I'll be screen sharing with you, but I'll be keeping myself there in the bottom right-handish, middle-ish, bottom right-handish corner. So you can see me down there now. You can see the text in front of me. This is the book itself. And then down in the bottom left, down here, you'll see my recording software. I use Reaper. Above that, you will find the region marker manager. That's so that this is Married for Revenge. We're recording, but I have another project alongside it, which is the character voices. If I click on the character voices, I take a sample of each character as they crop up so that I can make sure character voices match between books and chapters and even box sets. Okay, so box sets, by the way, if you are interested in big box sets for 1 credit on Audible, then just go to longlistenlibrary.com and you'll find all of my big box sets there. So, without further ado, on we go. I have a quick sip of cranberry juice, keep my mouth relatively quiet. It's very acidic, so it stimulates the salivatory response. It means there's less mouth noise for my beautiful, wonderful editor to edit out later. Okay, so on we go with chapter 53. Chapter 53. The guest chamber was commodious and luxurious. Darcy was not in the mood to admire it, although he had to admit it was better than any inn would have been. Mr. Maunder was clearing away the shaving paraphernalia as Darcy frowned out of the window, deep in thought, when Richard breezed in after a perfunctory knock at the door. "Let's go down for dinner. And cheer up, man. It is better than staying at another inn." "True." Darcy joined him, and they descended the stairs. He bowed to his host and hostess. "We are grateful you have permitted us to stay here during the enforced rest day." Right, what's going on here? I have here my notes, because I've already read the book, to make sure that I can. I've already sort of got notes, and all I've got for Mrs. Hailsham, who's just crocking up here, I've got a note asking myself if these are cameos from another book. I don't believe they are. I've certainly not recorded them before because I had a look. So they are living at Bowburn House. So they are status. And just it said the guest chamber is commodious and luxurious. So there's cash here, but I don't have any specific notes on them as characters. So we just need to make sure that the character voices that I choose for them are appropriate. So let's have a... that was a bad last line as well. So just have a quick young, handsome gentleman in our pew this morning. That tells us that they are not young. I'm just having a quick look, going down to dine, and that's it. Okay, so we literally, this is a part scene. So We are grateful you have permitted us to stay here during the enforced rest day. Nonsense. Mrs. Hailsham patted his arm. It has been a pleasure, and the sight of two young and handsome gentlemen with the... I'll pick it up from there. And the sight of two young and handsome gentlemen with us in our pew this morning undoubtedly caused a great deal of excitement amongst the girls at church. And then I will go and grab this, because I still don't know if they will turn up again. So I'll grab Mrs. Hailsham, and I will make a note of her there, just in case we have to get the voice again. And then we carry on. Darcy smiled. It was easy to do, now he was married and safe from pursuit. Messed that pursuit up. Darcy smiled. It was easy to do, now he was married and safe from pursuit. Pursuit. Go again. Darcy smiled. It was easy to do, now he was married and safe from pursuit. You are very kind, madam. Mr. Hailsham offered his arm to his wife. Let us go and dine. That's too close to Darcy, really. Let's, Mr. Hailsham offered his arm to his wife. Let us go and dine. We can do... Let's give him a real thin... Let us go and dine. There we go. Let's grab Mr. Hailsham, and that just needs to... There we go. Grab that. Mr. Hailsham. Onwards, ever onwards. His wife. Let us go and dine. As they led the way into the dining room, he looked back. You said you wished to leave at dawn tomorrow? Indeed, thank you. Darcy bowed his head. Well, I understand there is some urgency, but can it really not wait until the afternoon? I do miss not having anyone around. I do miss not having anyone around to make a fishing party. Sir, I would be honoured to return and fish with you when this matter is accomplished, but I do believe it is important for us to do this in a timely manner, as our cousin may have need of us. Of course, of course. Well, anything we can do to help, we will. I am glad your uncle wrote and told you to break your journey here. Richard yawned prodigiously as the coach turned out of the drive of Bowburn House. When you said dawn, I did not think you literally meant dawn. Darcy smiled thinly. It is not dawn. I really did not think Mrs. Hailsham would join us for breakfast, and it has delayed our getting away by some hours. The sky... The sky looked as if... Come on, I'm stamping all over my own cues there. The sky looked as if it was set fair at least, but we ought to get there by noon at least. He smiled at Richard's slumped figure. You ought to have had another cup of coffee. Another heroic yawn. It matters not. I will be alert when the campaign starts, Darcy. Well, be alert. Be alert. Your country needs alerts. Well, be alert, then. I want to discuss the campaign with you now. Very well, let's hear it. Again. If you think you have it all in mind, then you can tell me if I have considered everything properly. Darcy was nettled. They were drawing closer to their quarry with every mile, and he wanted this whole business over with. I don't want to lose Wickham now. We're going first to the district where the bank is located, where he last drew money from his account, Richard recited. It is in the northwest of the city. Your man and mine will find some local men to disperse in the area and find out which taverns Wickham is drinking in and locate where he is living. If we don't find him, then we will expand the search to different parts of the city. He eyed Darcy sardonically. You see, I can recall what you've said. I am surprised. Darcy felt aggrieved. You seemed well in your cups when I said it. Richard snorted. "You're lowering your opinion of me." "What do you think is happening to our little cousin?" Darcy said softly. "You seem to be taking our search a little less seriously today." Richard looked abashed and became solemn. "You are right. I think I'm trying to forget the purpose of it all." He rubbed his face. "Thank you. There is something important, and we're missing it." Darcy glanced ahead around the bend, not around the bend. Darcy glanced ahead round the bend in the road. "I do wish we might arrive earlier." Done. Okay, now we turn that into a region. We turn the region into a chapter. Label it up. Chapter 53. Get everything there. Save it off. And get ready for 54. Quick slurp. Okay. Right, away we go. Chapter 54. The coach drew to a halt outside the run-down building in the narrow street, but Elizabeth took no notice of her surroundings. She ran up the steps and rapped on the door. Her maid followed her, and she saw the deputy steward swinging down from beside the coachman. The door opened, and a slatternly woman looked surprised at the sight of her, but Elizabeth had no time to think about it. "My friend, Mrs. Wickham, has written to ask for my assistance. I've come as soon as I could." Right, we are still up in Manchester, aren't we? Near Manchester, I believe. Tell you what I'm going to do. We're on 435. Let me just... where are we? Just this slatternly Newcastle woman I've got in my notes. Newcastle's an awfully difficult accent. No. I'm going to end up... Going out on the tune, right? Going out on the tune. Oh, it's a bit difficult, you see. But that's a bit difficult, see. She's having a difficult time, ma'am. It's not a sight for a lady. Phew, got to be careful with that. It's a bit difficult. There it is. Difficult. Right. Oh, it's a bit difficult, see. Okay. Well, my assistance. I've come as soon as I could. Oh, the other didn't open the door any wider. It's a bit difficult, see. No, it's not right. It's basically it's Ant and Dec, but it's such a hard accent to get right. You pretty, don't you know you? Know you? Right. This is problematic. Okay, how are we going to get around this? I really need to book some Newcastle with my voice coach, really, because how many lines have we got? Mary, it's a friend of Mrs. Wickham. You can get the rhythm's okay. Let's go and have a look and see if we can. It's not many. Let's see if we can just go and grab some resources. There are some fabulous people. Basic Newcastle. I have done it before. I did a whole show in it once, actually, a very, very long time ago. But you just... Matt Pocock. He's pretty good. Let's see if you can get me back into it, Matt.
Hello folks, today we're doing the Newcastle accent, the Geordie accent, and we're going to be focusing on one sound in particular, which is the O sound.
Ooh,
this is my
no.
favourite sound in the Newcastle accent, and there are a few to get your teeth into, so this is good. It usually is notated like this in RP, which is the
O, yeah, O.
And it's in words like know, alone, shown, notice, stone, and burrito. And it usually feels like this. It starts in the centre of the mouth and moves backwards.
O. Yeah, O.
You can feel a slight shift in resonance there. And the lips start from a very neutral position, and end in an
O. Yeah.
Now, in the Geordie accent, it goes into something crazy, which is the
or
sound. Starting with an or position, ending in an position. It starts right at the back.
Or.
Words like for,
or,
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 and it ends in a schwa, in a position.
or,
Or.
or,
And the lips
or.
look like this. They start in a or position and end in a more relaxed area. So instead of or, it's or.
Or,
No,
or,
alone, shown,
or.
notice, stone, burrito turns into
No,
allure,
alone, shown, notice, stone, burrito,
and
oh,
stone cold burrito.
no,
Stone
stone cold burrito,
Stone
stone cold burrito,
Stone
stone cold, stone cold, stone cold burrito, stone cold burrito. Right, thank you, Matt. Let me see then if that is going to get me where I need to be. It's a bit difficult, see. She here, well, she's having a difficult time, ma'am. It's not a sight for a lady. No, it's not a sight. That's right. It's not a sight for a lady. It's not a sight for a lady. Right. Let's get a bit of Ant and Dec, actually. That might get us where we need to do. Ant and Dec. Give us a little bit of a video of Ant and Dec. Fun with lollies and soap. Let's see if we can get it here. Here. The lolly. What are you doing? I can't hear you. Oh, that's why. Soap, lolly, soap, lolly, lolly, soap, lolly. Ready. Lolly, soap, lolly. Lolly, soap, lolly. Right. So getting at something there. So it's right at the front of the mouth. Almost. Right. Let's have some more on Dec. See if we can get this. Right. I don't know if you can hear. I don't think you can hear the. I've just realised. Oh, it's very loud. Episode.
It is so exciting.
No
The
thanks.
show's always on the cusp of bankrupting on TV. It's back for a fourth series. Does that ever blow your mind?
Bankrupted them yet. Not yet. Maybe this
Yet.
series.
Maybe the series.
Yeah, you do think about that.
You do
And-
think
and
about that.
We got especially this series as
We
well.
got especially the
quite
series
high
as well.
on the ladder on
Got
more than
high
one
up the ladder.
occasion. And a couple of times you
Ladder.
Go, God, if they
Oh.
bank this now.
Right, where is it?
We got the rest of the season. We just end here. We all pack up.
Just
and
to
go home.
end here,
But it's
here,
so
here,
exciting because
here.
of that.
So
We
exciting
always want them to
because
win the
here
most money they can. Because you're with them. You're living
you're
it
with them.
We don't
You're
know
living it with
questions.
them.
We certainly
You
don't know
don't
the
know.
answers.
You
And you're
don't know
stood
where
next
you're
to
with
them,
them.
and all you're doing
All you're doing
internally is kind of
internally
willing them to win.
is like
You
kind of
can see
willing
that
them
it's
to
fun
win.
when you watch it, that you
Right.
two are enjoying it as much as we are back at home. You're getting thrilled for them.
Oh, God, and our nerves are shredded at the end of it because you've kind of lived it with them. That we'll spend the whole game with a couple, and then you get to that, so we shoot them all in the course
Shoot
of a
them
week.
all.
And you get to like
You get to like lunchtime. Lunchtime.
My nerves are in tatters.
Nerves and
It must be a
tatters.
roller coaster.
Nerves
You
are
know
in
a bit of backstory
tatters.
about them. You
Nerves
start
are
to
in
learn about
tatters.
them and know what the
Lunchtime.
money's for.
Nerves are in tatters.
Well, we've had
Tatters.
so many.
Nerves are in tatters. Right, let's see if we can do anything with this. Oh, it's a bit difficult, see. Well, she's having a difficult time, ma'am. It's not a seat for a lady. No, that's going Northern Ireland. She's having a difficult time, ma'am. It's not a seat for a lady. It's not a seat for a lady. Almost. It's a bit difficult. Right, keep it at the front of the mouth. That's why it's going into Northern Ireland. It's a bit difficult, see. Well, she's having a difficult time, ma'am. It's not a seat for a lady. It's not a seat for a lady. No, that's going straight into Northern Ireland. I think it's a bit difficult, see. She's having a difficult time, ma'am. It's not a sight for a lady. It's not a sight for a lady. Let's split the difference. We'll go for North Yorkshire with a hint of it, and I think we might get to where we need to be.
The other didn't open the door any wider.
That's a bit difficult, see. Is she here? Elizabeth asked, determined to gain entry. Well, she's having a difficult time, ma'am. It's not a sight for a lady. That doesn't matter. Take me to her now. Elizabeth. No, she's got a hand. That's. That doesn't matter. Take me to her now. Elizabeth put all the authority. No, she can be more authoritative than that. That doesn't matter. Take me to her now. Elizabeth put all the authority in her voice she could muster. The woman's eyes flickered to the coach filling the street, polished and gleaming in the dirty surroundings. Polished and gleaming in the dirty surroundings. Well, if you insist, lady, but I ain't pretty. No, okay, so let's go back to Anton Deck. Right there. No, because that R is Northern Ireland. If you insist, lady. Right, let's go and listen to a bit more of them, try and get back on it. Cases where
they're coming on the show to
they're
win
coming on the show to win
money.
money.
We had a couple that
Win money.
Get money for
Get money for
Oh, so
adoption
it's like
process.
adoption
Process.
loads of money and
Loads of money.
help
Help
out.
out.
And it makes it
out.
so exciting
So exciting to be out.
but it is nerve shredding.
It's nerve shredding. Out, nerve shredding. Exciting. If you insist, lady, but it ain't pretty, and I doubt she'll know you. Right down. Well, if you insist, lady, but it ain't pretty, and I doubt she'll know you. Doubt. Stuff splashy tea. Well, if you insist, lady, but I ain't. If you insist, lady. Well, if you insist, lady, but it ain't pretty, and I doubt she'll know you. Yeah. Well, if you insist, lady, but it ain't pretty, and I doubt she'll know you. Elizabeth's heart sank. Take me to her. She followed the woman up the narrow stairs to the next tiny landing, the stairs winding further up to the higher levels. The woman knocked. Mary, it's a friend of Mrs. Wickham. The answer was indistinct, but Elizabeth... The answer was indistinct, but Elizabeth wasn't in any mood for a conversation through a closed door. Her heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. She swallowed and pushed her way in. Sophia was lying on a narrow bed in the corner. Her skin was waxy pale, and her eyes were closed. And there was blood. A lot of blood. The sight of her unmoving form unnerved Elizabeth, but she bit her lip and went forward. The other woman was busy about Sophia's lower body, but Elizabeth was able to take Sophia's hand and reach out to touch her face. I'm here, Sophia. I'm here. I came just as soon as I could. Her friend's Her friend's eyes opened, but Elizabeth could discern no sign of recognition, and they closed again an instant later, as if the effort was just too great. There was an old chair by the head of the bed, and Elizabeth drew it towards her with her free hand, not letting go of Sophia with the other. She leaned over her friend. Surely this was the end for her, and she knew tears were running down her face. A crash at the door jerked her head up, and she saw her maid had fallen to the floor. Get her away. Get her away. Get her away. The rough voice of the woman at the other end of the cot caused the elderly woman with her to cross to the door and to close it on Emily's unconscious. Try breathing, Rafe. The rough voice of the woman... Breathe. The rough voice of the woman at the other end of the cot caused the elderly woman with her to cross to the door and close it on Emily's unconscious form. Elizabeth would have to do something about that later, but now she needed to think about her friend. What's... she ventured in a whisper. The other woman shook her head. We've been trained to stop it all night, lady, but it's no good. No, that's awful, awful accent work. Back to Ant and Dec.
Don't know the questions and answers. So we're there on
So
the
we're
right
there,
next to them.
right
It
next to
is
them.
exhilarating.
Exhilarating. And that moment,
we'll
we'll dial an answer in.
and then the
A
partner
step
will
back,
just kind of
and
step
the
forward,
partner will
turn it
step
on.
forward
Oh,
and
what are you
turn to
doing?
what are you doing?
What
What are you doing?
It's such good telling.
It is. Right. Right.
It's so good. I like
Absolutely
you
is.
say, knows the answer. The other one's
Right.
not sure.
Okay, let's go back to it. Let's go back to it. We've been trying to stop it all night, lady, but it's no good. I think she's gone. Right. Right. I'll go back to there. There. We've been trying to stop it all night, lady, but it's no good. She glanced at Sophia's face. I think she's gone. Elizabeth looked back at her friend's face. The bloodless lips were slightly apart, her eyes closed forever, and Elizabeth leaned forward to kiss her. There was a slight grunt from the other woman, and Elizabeth looked round to see her reach for a length of twine. A moment later, she lifted the tiny body of a baby from her friend. Too small, see? He never had a chance. She took a soiled piece of cloth and wrapped the babe in it, tucking him on his mother's arm. Then she turned back and dragged a dirty blanket over the lower half of Sophia's body. You got courage, lady. I see that. Most of them couldn't take it. Elizabeth turned to look at the baby. She had never seen a child so tiny. Her hand went to her mouth as his chest moved. He's breathing. The old lady moved into the light. She must be at least 80 years old, Elizabeth thought wildly. Was she the only person available to help the other woman in the role of midwife? Poor little mate. The crackled, poor little mate. Poor little mate. The cracked. Poor little mate. The cracked old voice hid a kindly heart. She picked him up. Reckon you need a wee bit of comfort? Let me. Elizabeth reached up. Let me hold him, please. As the baby was laid in the crook of her arm, she felt an overwhelming sorrow, and she reached for her friend's hand. Sophia, I am so sorry. I'm sorry it took me so long, and I couldn't be here when you needed me. She wept as the tiny baby took a few more gasping breaths, growing weaker. Growing weaker and quieter until they stopped altogether. Time stopped, and she realized the other women had left the room, the sunlight weakened by the grime on the window. What a place to end things. The consequences of Sophia's choice had led her here, and Elizabeth hadn't asked her who she wanted to marry. She might have been able to stop her, might have been able to help her choose a different path. Breathe. She did not have a hand free to dash the tears from her eyes, and she didn't wish to. Time did not matter. She would sit here and say her farewells for just as long as she could. It's a hell of a scene. Okay, save it off. Gotta keep going. Chapter 55. Darcy was relieved as the coach... No, don't bring that over into the next chapter. You know better than that. Chapter 55. Darcy was relieved as the coach finally rolled into the southern part of the city. Half an hour, and they'd be able to begin to search for Wickham and his cousin. His lips tightened. He must find them soon. He did not want to spend months always a step behind them. He wanted to go back to Pemberley, back to Elizabeth, and try to repair the breach in their marriage. Another 40 minutes or more before they got to the right part of the city. Richard was gazing out of the window, seeming to try to get the temper of the place. "I think we'll be able to find men who can make our inquiries, Darcy. There looks to be a mix of types." Darcy nodded and looked out of his side of the... Darcy nodded and looked out of his side of the coach. The streets here were rather narrow, with a plethora of alleyways. A curricule dashed across their path, and the shout of his coachman and the livery of the driver drew his attention. "It's a Pemberley vehicle." "What?" Richard slid up the seat. Darcy banged the roof with his cane, and his coach swung round to follow the curricule up the lane. "What the deuce is it doing here?" Richard was leaning out of the window. Richard was leaning out of the window, having forced it open. "My steward's in it," Darcy said tightly. "He is charged with protecting Elizabeth, but she is not in it." Dread was coiling inside him. What was she doing here in Newcastle? Had she known where Sophia was all along? No, she was still writing to her friend in Sandridge. She could not know she was here. He pulled Richard back from the window and leaned out himself. "There's my other coach." No, that sounded like a mix of the two. "There's my other coach." He reached for his hat and held himself ready to leap out as soon as the vehicle stopped. He saw Richard preparing himself too. As his coach drew up behind the other vehicles... As his coach drew up behind the other vehicles, he leapt out. Reed hurried to him and bowed. "I have just seen it, sir. Mrs. Darcy left when I was away from Pemberley, and I followed her at once." Darcy nodded. "Is she within?" Reed nodded. "She brought Mr. Robbins with her. He says she entered about an hour ago, with her maids." The door to the narrow tenement was open, and Darcy could just see the two maids in their uniforms huddled in the hallway. He strode up the steps. He must find Elizabeth. An older maid was supporting the younger, whom he recognized as Elizabeth's lady's maid. "Where is Mrs. Darcy?" The girl swallowed. "Upstairs, sir. I couldn't..." But he wasn't listening. Another woman had come to the door of the parlour. "It's no place for a gentleman, sir. I'll go and bring her down." "No, that's not right. Down. Right, let's go back to Ant and Deck." "It's no place for a gentleman, sir." "Sir,
And obviously,
that's no place for a gentleman,
sure,
sir."
for people that don't understand it, at times there's lifelines,
Yeah.
and one of the lifelines that you brought in from season 2
Yeah.
was that you two can help.
Yes.
What's
we,
that pressure
we
like?
didn't bring in that lifeline. That was the producers, and it would be really fun if... Well, all right, we'll try it. And every time that lifeline comes up, take 2, our hearts sink a little bit and our palms get sweaty and kind of dry my thing.
Dry my fingers. Any of these questions now. Now.
30 seconds to lock in an answer.
30 seconds. 30 seconds. 30 seconds to lock down an answer. 30 seconds to discuss it. 30 seconds to discuss it. 30 seconds to discuss it. Got 30 seconds to discuss it. Right, got 30 seconds. It's no place for a gentleman, so I'll go and bring her down. Down, right. 30 seconds to discuss it. It's no place for a gentleman, so I'll go and bring her down. Down. I'll go and bring her down. Another woman had come to the door of the parlour. "It's no place for a gentleman, sir. I'll go and bring her down." "I will go and find my wife. Which door?" The woman shrank back at his voice. "Upstairs, sir. First door." He took the stairs 3 at a time, and a deep breath as he got to the landing. He knew Richard was behind him, and he held out his hand to stop him. He thought he was prepared for the sight within, but he could never. But he could never have been. No sign of Wickham. Sophia's still, pale form on the narrow bed. a blanket roughly drawn over her lower body. Blood, a lot of blood. And Elizabeth. Elizabeth, sitting on an old, spindly chair beside her friend, cradling something in her arm, her other hand covering that of her friend, weeping softly, her gown spattered and streaked with blood. He crossed the room. She needed comfort, and he cared not for himself if she rejected. He crossed the room. She needed comfort, and he cared not for himself if she rejected him. But if she did, who was here to comfort her? He crouched down, seeing the tiny form of a baby in her arm. Elizabeth. He couldn't prevent himself, and placed his arm gently round her shoulder. I am so sorry you had to bear this alone. Her breath hitched, and her head turned into his shoulder. His heart swelled protectively, and all he could feel was aching sorrow at her pain. He eased himself onto his knee. He would wait for her to decide what she wished to do. The scent of lavender rose over the smell of dirt and death, and he let his gaze wander around the room. Sophia, smaller than ever, her face peaceful. He could not imagine what she must have suffered. And the family had failed to protect her from Wickham. His heart hardened. It must be the last time. He had bought up many, not so many, just many. He had bought up many of the scoundrel's debts, and he could buy those the man had not paid off with the money gifted him. Darcy would ensure the man would spend the rest of his life in debtor's jail. He must put a stop on whatever of the money remained. Wickham would then arrive in London to attempt to gain Sophia's allowance. He wouldn't be aware of her death, or that they knew of it. Darcy must be ready with the evidence required to have him arrested for the debt. He must get He must get Elizabeth back to Pemberley and help her recover from the shattering shock. First, arrangements for Sophia. He would arrange for her and her child to be buried in the Fitzwilliam plot at Matlock. She was family. Perhaps a clergyman could be found to administer... That sounded a bit too cockney. Hold on. She's family. It's no good. She was family. Perhaps a clergyman could be found to administer prayers for the sick and baptize the child. He knew of at least one occasion where the declaration of death had been quietly delayed to allow it. Then the child could be acknowledged. He shuddered. Not George. He would not permit it to be called George. Perhaps the child was female. Then the issue wouldn't arise. Despite himself, he found he was reaching out a finger and tracing the delicate line of the tiny head. He tried so hard. Oh, she's got me there. Well done, Elizabeth. Elizabeth's murmur was scratchy and broken. He lived for about 5 minutes before he slipped away. Darcy's arm tightened around her. A moment more, and he bent his head towards her. Would you like it if I could attempt to find a parson to come and baptize him? Do you know what Sophia would have named him? She huffed a laugh and smoothed the tiny face with the side of her finger. Her father was Andrew Bannerman. She would like him to be called Andrew, I think. Come, Darcy wanted her to leave this room. If you place him with his mother, we can go to make the arrangements. She shook her head and didn't move. I would like to wait here while you go, please, William. She gave him a watery smile. I will be better sitting here than leaving. She had called him William. Darcy's heart turned over. Was she pleased he was here? But he hesitated. Perhaps it would be better if you... She smiled at him. Please. He could argue no longer. Reluctantly, he withdrew his arm. I will be as quick as I can. Right, now I can take a second. Excuse me. Jolly good writing. Done well. Oh dear. Right, okay. He went to the door. On the other side, Richard was waiting. He seemed to have heard most of it, and his face was like thunder. Darcy put his finger to his lips and drew him downstairs. I need a sip as well, actually. Come on, back on it. All right, Richard. You need to find a clergyman to do the prayers for the sick and a baptism, and willing to do so now for whatever consideration is needed. He turned to his steward. Arrange a coffin and a conveyance to take them to Pemberley. I expect them to be buried in the family plot at Matlock, but I will need to see my aunt first. He thought. 150 miles. The burial would need to be the same day as they arrived. He looked for the deputy steward. Mr. Robbins, please ensure the horses are changed on both coaches and the curricule, and get back here as soon as possible. Where was the chief maid? You, fetch me a clean blanket from the coach before it leaves, please, and arrange for tea downstairs as soon as Mrs. Darcy comes down. He climbed the stairs again, the clean blanket folded over his arm. Elizabeth glanced up at him as he draped it over her shoulders. Thank you. It is welcome. She had placed the baby in the crook of his mother's arm and was holding her friend's hand again. Ooh, this is hard work, in a good way. Darcy touched Elizabeth's shoulder, still almost unable to believe he was with her, and amazed at her strength. Were you here in time for her? She shook her head, her eyes on her friend's face. I don't think so. She opened her eyes when I spoke to her, but I didn't see any sign of recognition. I thought she squeezed my hand, but I was probably imagining it. His hand tightened on her shoulder. Perhaps she did know you had come to her. It might just have taken too much effort to speak. Perhaps. She was dry-eyed now, almost too matter-of-fact. She touched the child's forehead. She touched the child's forehead, and then Sophia's. After a moment or two of looking down, she took a deep breath and turned towards the door. I am ready now. Thank you for making the arrangements. Not quite right. Not quite right. I am ready now. No, I need the breath as well. I am ready now. Thank you for making the arrangements. Yep, that'll do. No, it's still not right. Still not right. Still doesn't feel right. I am ready now. Thank you for making the arrangements. That's right. Face back on. Okay. I really do need to give myself a reset now. Great. Love it when books can do that to you. Okay. Jolly good. Okay, so they've got their game faces back on now. Why isn't... something's going on here. What's going on here? I haven't just made that. So first of all, Chapter 7 doesn't say Chapter 7, and it should do. And also, something's going on behind that. You can just see there's another... Go behind everything. Is it that chapter I just did? There's basically what's happening is there's a region behind all those chapter regions. Yes, it's the one I just did. So let's remove that region. There we go. That's what should have happened. That's chapter 55. Chajapter. How is that a chajapter? Let's spell it properly, shall we? Keep it all in the right order for my beautiful, wonderful editor. Right, now we can save that because it's right, and on we go. Okay. Chapter 56. Elizabeth sat in the comfortable coach as they rolled away from Newcastle and the sadness. William's arm was round her, ineffably comforting. She had insisted on placing the blanket to protect the cushions before she sat on it, although it was too late for his suit, and she leaned against his shoulder. "Thank you for finding me," she said softly. "I could never have made such suitable arrangements." His arm tightened slightly. "I am sorry you had to bear it alone." "The dreadful thing is I was too late to assist her. She must have thought no one was coming to help." The solid warmth of him helped strengthen her, his steady breathing comforting her that she was among the living. She shivered slightly, and he drew her closer. "May I reach for another blanket for you?" She shook her head. "No, thank you, I am well." She had to stop thinking of what was behind them and consider what lay ahead. She forced a smile. I think the Sophia. I think the Sophia I knew would smile at the look the innkeeper is going to give our appearance when we stop and ask for something to eat, and when we must stop for the night. She could feel him huff a quiet laugh. "I sent the servant to collect a basket, although I was not sure how much of a picnic you would wish to have." She shook her head, but thought he might be hungry. "I will try. Thank you." His head was close to hers. "You are the bravest lady I have ever met." Sophia was brave too. She sighed. "I will show you her letter." She sighed. "I will show you her letter." She knew she must accept the consequences of her choice. His arm tightened, but he didn't speak. Perhaps he did not know what to say that would not offend her, but his presence was the comfort she needed now. She felt his chest rise as he took a deep breath. "I have sent Mr. Robbins ahead to look for a suitably large inn with better facilities if he can find one." He sighed. "We may need to go as far as Beamish or Chester." "Thank you for your consideration." She felt vexed. Why did she sound so formal? She stirred after a while. She must have been tired after the events of the morning. The coach had slowed and was turning into a post-inn. It meant she had slept an hour or more. Changing the horses, William murmured, "You may continue resting." "Do you wish to get out?" Elizabeth pushed herself straight. He reached for her. "I am well." "I am well." She leaned back against him with a sigh. She would not willingly return to the coldness that had been between them. She was very ready to retire when they did reach the White Hart at Beamish, and the maids hurried to assist her. She's a bit snotty. In her chamber, Elizabeth sat on the chair while they waited for the hot water to be brought up, and Emily unpacked her a clean new gown. "Thank you, Emily." Emily, eh? Elizabeth. Elizabeth would feel much better when there was no outward sign of the day, even if she would be in the private parlour. Mostly, she would be happy if she could ensure her face was cleaned of all her all tear marks, not all. Oh, excuse me, lunchtime burps. Mostly, she would be happy if she could ensure her face was cleaned of all tear marks. She must have looked dreadful, but William hadn't appeared concerned. As she rubbed her face hard with the towel, she wondered if he considered himself guilty for not having been able to gain Sophia's affections and proceeding to marriage. Excuse me. It was like herself feeling guilty she hadn't prevented her friend eloping with Mr. Wickham. Oh, I am Mr. Voice Noise today, aren't I? If she had prevented it, Sophia would now be alive. She'd be married to William, expecting his child. Elizabeth shuddered and sat down hurriedly on the edge of the bed. "Are you well, Mrs. Darcy?" Emily sounded afraid. "Yes," Elizabeth murmured into the towel. She lifted her head. "Please leave me a few minutes. I must think." The quiet knock was only a few minutes later, and she heard his steps crossing the room. The mattress tilted as he sat beside her. "I apologize if I am disturbing you, but your maid was concerned for your well-being." Elizabeth leaned against him for a moment. "I am pleased to see you." She reached to touch his hand. "I don't want to be alone." They sat in silence for a long time before Elizabeth drew a shaky breath. "I wish I had asked her what his name was before I told her to follow her heart. I might have been able to stop her. She would be alive now." His arm tightened round her, and he drew her closer. "Still got gobbly bits." "You don't know that. At any moment, you can only do what you think is right." His other hand went under her chin and tipped her face up. Her eyes were dark and serious. "You received a letter from her and hurried to find her to do what you could. You can be proud of that." She turned her face away. "I know, but..." Her voice broke and she shook her head, rising to her feet and crossing to the window. "I am all right now. I will ring for Emily and prepare for dinner." He looked troubled. "I will be in the next chamber, Elizabeth. If you wish, we might walk along the lane to the stream before we dine." She smiled at him, seeing the lines of strain and exhaustion on his features. He had been suffering too, and probably in the coach many days. "I would like that. Thank you." 10 minutes later, she descended the stairs, where he was waiting for her. She took his arm when he offered it, and they strolled along the narrow lane in a companionable silence. The evening chorus was just beginning. The evening chorus was just beginning, and Elizabeth tilted her head to listen. "That's a woodlark." He nodded. "I expect the nightingale will be joining in soon." He waited patiently while she stood and listened as the song swelled around them. Then she turned and resumed their stroll. She must not be too melancholy. He did not deserve it, not didn't. Then she turned and resumed their stroll. She must not be too melancholy. He did not deserve it, and it was her task to begin looking forward. "Had you just arrived in Newcastle, William? You look very weary." He nodded. "We were entering the city in preparation to begin our search, as we had no information on where they were living." He grimaced slightly. "If I had not happened to see the curricule, we might have missed you and not been able to assist." It's not pained enough. "If I had not happened to see the curricule, we might have missed you and not been able to assist." There was pain in his voice. She tightened her fingers on his arm. "But you did, and I'll always be grateful for it." She smiled slightly. "Thank you." As they strolled, she thought for a moment. "Did you go straight to Newcastle from Manchester? It must be 10 days or more since Lady Matlock said you were going to Manchester." He frowned. "So she did call upon you, despite my telling her not to." He reached his hand over to touch hers. "I am sorry if she caused you any distress." She tried not to laugh. "I am sorry too, but I think she is likely to cause you more vexation when she sees you. I don't think she was very pleased when I said she ought to ask you and not me whether Darcy is happy with the situation." He looked outraged. "She asked you that?" Elizabeth laughed again. "You must not be too troubled. Of course she was curious, but as I had not met her before, I was unsure whether any answer of mine might be the subject of gossip, so all my responses were more in the form of platitudes. I am not surprised she was piqued." He chuckled. "When I saw you deal with Lady Catherine in Kent, I knew you would be safe from my family. But it doesn't detract from the fact I had assured you that you would not be troubled by callers until you wished for it. I am sorry, Elizabeth." It was her turn to smile. Excuse me. It was her turn to smile. "It seems we both think we have much to apologize for." But she wasn't going to turn the subject away. "So where have you been since you left London?" He sighed. "Mostly in the coach. From Pemberley I went to London, then immediately back north to Manchester, then Leeds." He hesitated. "Then south to Sandridge and north to Newcastle." "Sandridge?" She thought a moment. "I'd like to ask you about it, but not today." He nodded. "Perhaps we ought to return to the inn. Dinner will be ready for us." Chapter 56. Chapter 57. Darcy sat beside her at the table in the private parlour. She was eating very little, but he had expected that, and his own appetite was somewhat lacking. However, it seemed she was determined not to play upon her sorrow and distress, but find other matters to talk about. "I did not thank you at the time for ensuring I was able to assist with the restoration of the hothouse." She sipped her drink. "The furnaces are being—" Yeah, that's right. "The furnaces are being brought back into use for the coming winter. I am looking forward to seeing how it is progressing." His mind went to Pemberley. "One day, perhaps, you will permit me to join you and see it. I have not been there since I was a small boy." But her tiredness was getting the better of her, and the conversation slowed. Finally, she looked up. "I am very sorry, William. I think I will need to retire soon." She hesitated. "Might I be very presumptuous and ask—" She seemed to flounder for a moment before she whispered, "I don't want to be alone tonight." His heart pounded. "If you wish, Elizabeth, I will join you in your chamber and be there for you, or I can instruct your maid to take a cot in the room, if that is what you meant." She rippled into laughter. "No, Emily would not be the companionship I think I need tonight." He rose to his feet. "Then I will see you in a few moments, Elizabeth." He lay there still with Elizabeth in his arms as the moonlight filtered through the thin curtains. She had asked him for comfort, and he was glad enough that she accepted it from him. He thought she was not yet asleep and feigning it in order not to have to talk. He was fatigued himself, but he knew he would not be able to sleep until late into the night. He wanted to keep still and his breathing regular in order that he not disturb her, so he must regulate his thoughts. It had been the greatest good fortune that he had seen the Pemberley carriages as they passed into the city. It meant Elizabeth had not been alone in the aftermath of disaster for too— Breathe. It meant Elizabeth had not been alone in the aftermath of disaster for too long. He lay, pondering on what still needed to be done. Richard had stayed behind. Darcy hoped he'd have concluded the arrangements, discovered the details of Sophia's last days from the other occupants of the house, and paid for the room to be put to rights. Then his cousin was going to— Oh, shit, it's not— That wasn't recording. He lay, pondering on what still needed to be done. Richard had stayed behind. Darcy hoped he'd have— Darcy hoped he'd have concluded the arrangements, discovered the details of Sophia's last days from the other occupants of the house, and paid for the room to be put to rights. Then his cousin was going to take the second coach directly to Matlock and see if Lady Matlock would approve the burial in the Fitzwilliam plot. He would then return to the road to meet Darcy's steward and direct his final miles. Mr. Reed was using the curricule to escort Darcy's young cousin on her last journey. If Richard was able to meet him with Matlock consent, then he would drive straight to Matlock. If not, he'd arrive at Pemberley, and Darcy would have to make urgent arrangements for her burial in Lambton. His lips tightened. One more night on the road. They would reach Pemberley at lunchtime on Wednesday, only a few hours before the burial would need to be concluded. He had found a moment to pen a short note to Georgiana earlier and sent it ahead to explain that he was returning to Pemberley with Elizabeth, following the loss of her friend. He hoped she was not too distressed by his letter, and that she and Elizabeth would be— Don't like that. He hoped she was not too distressed by his letter, and that she and Elizabeth would be able to support each other in the way only ladies could. He hoped she was not too distressed by his letter, and that she and Elizabeth would be able to support each other in the way only ladies could. They would need to keep each other company while he and Richard attended the burial, for themselves and on behalf of his uncle. He found himself reflecting on the courage of Elizabeth as he had burst into the room in that tenement building. She was weeping. Don't touch my work surface. She was weeping, of course she was, but her bravery in sitting there as a friend of many years lost her life was out of his experience for any lady, and for many gentlemen too. No lady could have been brought up to such strength. It must be an innate part of her character, and he loved her for that, and for all she was. She was his wife, They were together now, and he would never allow them to be parted. In all the sadness of these events, she had accepted his comfort, allowed him to assist her, and for that he was utterly thankful. He thought he would be able to sleep soon. If she moved in his embrace, he'd know. It wasn't movement, but wetness on his hand much later that roused him. His hand and arm were underneath her head, and he raised his own to see she was lying as still as he, and her tears were falling on his hand. "Dearest Elizabeth," his murmur caused her to grimace. "I am sorry. I didn't mean to disturb you." He tightened his arm and turned her towards him. "You asked me to be here, and that means comforting you when you need it." He reached under the pillow for one of the handkerchiefs he'd secreted there and handed it to her. "Thank you." Her voice was a mere breath of sound, and she dabbed at her eyes. The slightest laugh, which was almost a sob. "You are well prepared." He felt pained. "I am sorry, it is all I can do. I can't lessen the pain of what you've suffered this day." "I can't see how you could, so I will not hold it against you." She sighed and moved closer so her head rested on his shoulder. Still got that bit of snot snicking around. That's the trouble with emotional responses when you're working. It's good to have them. It's part of the job. You need to be openly emotionally available to the text and to the characters. But you do have to get out of it pretty quick. He chuckled. "That is a considerable relief." Her answering smile lifted his spirits. It seemed she would not succumb to a long melancholy. Chapter 57. Save it off. 57 DJ. No, chapter 57 D. Okay, get these sleeves rolled up as we warm up. Okay. Chapter 58. Elizabeth sat beside her husband as the coach turned into Pemberley. It was a great relief to her to be arriving home. Yesterday had been a very long day, and they had managed to reach Normanton, south of Leeds, before they had stopped for the night. She smiled to herself and leaned against him. It was pleasant now that he sat beside her and not on the opposite seat. "I've been thinking if I'm tired of riding in coaches, then you must be much more so." He smiled wryly. "I confess I will deeply appreciate staying at Pemberley for a while." The coach drew to a halt outside the steps to the great door, and William climbed out first, turning to offer his hand to assist her. She smiled at him, very glad to be home. "Thank you." She knew there was more to do before they could begin to relax and recover, and she needed time alone to mourn Sophia. She might have been their cousin, but William and Georgiana hadn't known her as she had. She climbed the steps on his arm, and as they entered the hall, Georgiana appeared from the drawing-room, her face anxious. "Oh, Elizabeth, I'm so sorry you lost your friend." She hurried over and took her hand. "I don't know how William found you, but I'm really happy he did." The butler was standing beside William, a note on a tray. Her husband turned to her. "Excuse me a moment, Elizabeth. There's a note from Richard." She smiled at him and dropped her hand from his arm. Walking through into the drawing-room with Georgiana, she sighed. "I would relish a cup of tea." "I have no doubt Mrs. Reynolds will have arranged it." Georgiana smiles. "She knows what we want before we do sometimes." Her smile vanished. Come and sit down, Elizabeth. You look worn out. Do you want to talk about what happened? Elizabeth sank back against the seat. I am sorry, I can't even sit up properly, Georgiana. I mean no offence to you. She stifled a yawn. And I will tell you what you want to know, but perhaps not today. The door opened and several maids carried in trays of tea. Elizabeth forced herself to sit up properly in the chair. She was very glad she had done so when, a moment later, William strode into the room. No, don't get up. He crossed the room in an instant and dropped into the chair next to Elizabeth. I'm sorry, Elizabeth and Georgiana, but I will need to leave you for a while and go to Matlock. Elizabeth met his eyes. I will come with you. He shook his head. No, Elizabeth, it is not seemly. I can take you there in a few days. She got to her feet. She has no one. He raised her hand to his lips. You are the bravest lady I know. I have told you that. But Richard and I will be there on our own behalf, on yours, and of our aunt and uncle, too. But you didn't know her, she burst out. She can't be buried without a friend with her. He closed his eyes. I understand how you feel, Elizabeth, I do, but I cannot permit you, a lady, to stand at the graveside. As she took a breath to object further, he lifted his hand to touch her face. Please accept this. For me. His murmur was quiet. She sighed. I will read my prayer book, then, at the same time as the ceremony. What time is it to be held? He looked relieved, and she He looked relieved, and she was sorry she was deceiving him. At 4 o'clock. Thank you, Elizabeth. I will see you later, and you, Georgiana. He bowed to them both and left the drawing-room. Elizabeth hurried to the window and watched as he ran down the steps to the coach. Before it was out of sight, she was ringing the bell vigorously. Order a coach for me at once, please. Tell my maid to bring my hat and coat and... Tell my maid to bring my hat and coat and prayer book. Georgiana was beside her. You can't disobey William. She sounded indignant. I am not going to, Elizabeth reassured her. I know I can't be there, but I'm sure there will be a hill and some trees. There will be, use your L's. But I'm sure there will be a hill and some trees to conceal myself behind. I can watch from a distance. She seized her sister's hand. Your brother will not be angry. He knows how stubborn I am. In fact, he possibly suspects I may do as much. She didn't think it was true, but Georgiana looked a little mollified. She hurried into the hall and let Emily adjust her hat and tie the ribbons. She glanced up at Georgiana. How long does it take to drive to Matlock? Matlock? Is she being buried there? Being. Oh, don't let another bird come in. Or have I? Okay. Georgiana, how long does it take to drive to Matlock? Matlock? Is she being buried there? I thought you were in Newcastle. She is. We were. Elizabeth caught her sister's hand and led her out onto the Elizabeth caught her sister's hand and led her out onto the steps, out of earshot of the servants. I will explain everything when I get back. Please forgive me, I must do this. Georgiana squeezed her hand. I will think of you. Elizabeth hurried down the steps. She was thankful to see Mr. Robbins there. Thank you for being here, Mr. Robbins. She stopped to think what to say to him. I know I cannot attend the burial, but it is in the Fitzwilliam family plot at Matlock at 4 o'clock. Can you think of a vantage point where I can watch from a suitable distance and not be observed? The man's brow furrowed as he thought. Now, have we had the deputy steward in any of these other books? Let's just go and have a look. Let's have a look. I don't know what I'd be searching for. Darcy London, Darcy Steward. Yeah, we know. So we haven't. He is likely to be northern, though. Relatively well educated. So let us. Mr. Robbins. There we go. Yeah, okay, I know what I'm doing for you. The man's brow furrowed as he thought. We'd have to go round the village, Mrs. Darcy, and approach from the south. There's a copse there you will be able to have a view from. He glanced at his watch, but time is quite short, as it is a long way round. And then we'll grab that for Mr. what? Mr. Robbins, single R, single B. Mr. Robbins. Okay. Gotcha. I got you, Mr. Robbins. I got you. The time is quite short, as it is a long way round. She smiled. Then let us be away. She accepted his hand to assist her into the coach and sat back, smiling slightly. She would be there for her friend. Thinking back, she speculated whether Georgiana had realized that her friend was Sophia. If she did, she was surprised she hadn't said her name, but then she had not either. She wondered if she'd be close enough to hear the words of the ceremony, and opened her prayer book to familiarize herself with the liturgy. True to his word, Mr. Robbins delivered her and her maid to the back of the copse. The coach stopped on the lane by it, and he assisted them down. Let me go and check that voice, get it matched up. Let us go and dine. Oh, that's not right. That's Mrs. Hailsham. Why did that not save? How odd. All right. Oh, because it's put it in as a marker for some reason. I don't know why it's done that. So we've got to do that. Let's do this again. No, I don't want to add marker. It's not what I want to do. Why is it not? Move marker. Okay. Something happened to this, and I don't know what it is. Add a marker. It's not doing the right thing. Unless it does that afterwards. Let's try. Liz, set the shortcuts up for me. Did it put it there? Mr. Robbins, yeah. We'd have to go around the village, Mrs. Right. So, fine. Okay, go in there. Stopped on the lane by it, and he assisted them down. There is a path here, Mrs. Darcy. Follow me. Thank you. Please stop before there is any chance of being seen, and I will go on alone. A few minutes later, that was a bit weird. A few minutes later, she was peering round a tree and looking at the small church at the edge of the village. In the churchyard was a walled area, well kept and orderly, the Fitzwilliam family private burial plot. It was the right place, an open grave and two men over by the fence with their shovels, waiting to finish their work. Elizabeth shivered. A few minutes later, the bell tolled, and the small procession left the church by the west porch, following the funeral service. She watched as the clergyman led the way to the grave, his robes billowing in the breeze. 4 men, bareheaded, carried the coffin behind him. Elizabeth was sure she recognized Mr. Reed, and was happy Sophia was in good hands. Behind them walked William and Richard, donning their hats as they left the church. She leaned forward to watch, and at that moment William glanced up. She saw him start, and she stepped back, hoping he had not noticed her. She could still see well, and she thought through the words the minister would be saying. Chapter 59. Darcy hoped Richard hadn't seen him start, and he looked away hurriedly so she wouldn't be seen by anyone else. He fixed his face with a solemn expression and watched the coffin being lowered into the ground. He was sorry he hadn't become properly acquainted with his cousin, and wondered if, as a child, she'd been as mischievous as it seemed Elizabeth had been, and still was. After all, she hadn't really disobeyed him. She wasn't by the graveside. He listened as the vicar prayed over Sophia's remains. Now, this is a Matlock man. I've got a clergyman there. Indeed he was, Mr. Owen, indeed he was. I think the name William... No, that is a main character. Who have I got? Meryton clergyman. Can't use that because we're not in Meryton. They're all misses. No, okay, so first time for... Excuse me. First time for the... He listened as the vicar prayed over Sophia's remains. Thou knowest, Lord, the secrets of our hearts. Shut not thy merciful ears to our prayer, but spare us, Lord most holy, O God most mighty, O holy and merciful Saviour, thou most worthy Judge eternal. Suffer us not, at our last hour, for any pains of death to fall from thee. And we'll have that as Matlock. So that's going to be clergyman Matlock, just in case. Okay. Pains of death to fall from thee. Richard nudged him, and he followed his cousin, collected a handful of dry soil, and cast it into the grave. No, he was glad Elizabeth was not here. But the rose lay on the coffin. He had ensured a Pemberley rose was there from Elizabeth. He could tell her that. Only a few words of the remaining ceremony caught his attention. Great mercy to take unto himself the soul of our dear... Breathe, man, breathe. Great mercy to take unto himself the soul of our dear sister here departed. We therefore commit her body to the ground, earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, in sure and certain hope. Wickham was the cause of her death. Wickham must not be allowed to cause ruin, injury, or death again. The service ended, and Darcy stood there beside Richard, his head bowed in respect. "I will come to Pemberley tomorrow, if I may," Richard murmured. "I want to call on Georgiana, and Mrs. Darcy knows I was with you in Newcastle." Darcy nodded. "I think she will be content with it. I know she was grateful for the arrangements you made." He glanced at his cousin. "I will ask her tonight. If she is unhappy at the thought, I will send word to you and bring Georgiana to Hayden Hall." He glanced surreptitiously at the corpse. She was still there. It would make Richard laugh. "You must promise not to tell your mother." Cops, not corpse. I was going to... She was still there. Send word to you and bring Georgiana to Hayden. He glanced surreptitiously at the cops. She was still there. It would make Richard laugh. "You must promise not to tell your mother, but I have seen Elizabeth in the copse up there." She was obviously not inclined to wait at home. He kept his murmur quiet. Richard's eyebrows rose, and he waited a moment before seeming to lazily look around. "Oh, yes, I see her," he chuckled. "You will have interesting lives once everything is settled." Darcy smiled wryly. "I will not come back to the house with you, but go to Pemberley." He frowned. "When I wrote to Georgiana, I mentioned Elizabeth. When I wrote to Georgiana, I mentioned Elizabeth had lost her friend, but from something she said, I wonder if she doesn't know the friend was Sophia. I must make sure she knows." Deep in conversation, he and Richard bowed at the grave and followed the vicar to the gate. He stopped by Mr. Reed, who was waiting there. "Thank you for staying. Do you have enough money to pay the gravediggers and the vicar?" "Yes, Mr. Darcy." The man nodded, stolidly reliable. As they went through the little lich gate, Mr. Darcy, I do that all the time. As they went through the little lich gate, Darcy glanced back. The diggers had not waited, but had begun filling in the grave. He looked up. Elizabeth was still there. He thought her hand was to her eyes. He nudged Richard. "I am going round to the copse. I'll send a note later." His cousin nodded and turned towards his horse. Darcy's coach drew up behind the other Pemberley one, and Darcy sprang out. He looked round. "Where are they?" The coachman touched his hat respectfully. "They went along the path, sir." He pointed. Darcy hurried through the copse. Surely she would have returned by now. It wasn't a long way. He saw Mr. Robbins and Elizabeth's maid in a small clearing and was relieved. She hadn't walked here completely alone. "Mrs. Darcy is a little further on, is she?" Right, now this is where saving voices is good. "Go round the village, Mrs. Darcy. He's down here." Okay. "Yes." Oh, hold on. Stamping all over my cues with gay abandon. "Yes, sir." Robbins touched his hat. "She asked us to wait here." "All right, I will go on. You can both take her coach back." Coach? It's a coach. "All right, I will go on. You can both take her coach back, and we will use the master one." He turned back to the path. A few yards further, and he turned the corner. Elizabeth was standing there, watching the churchyard. The grave had been filled, and the diggers were tidying the edges and placing a wooden marker cross. Darcy hoped they had been careful and not walked over the freshly turned earth. "Elizabeth?" She started and turned. Her eyes were red from weeping, but she didn't seem completely overcome. She patted her face with the handkerchief. One of his, he noticed with a noted. One of his, he noted with a... One of his, he noted with amusement. "You did see me then?" Her chin was raised. He smiled. "I did." He reached for her hand and lifted it to his lips. "Were you able to say goodbye better from here?" "As well as I could expect to," she sighed and glanced back down. "She will be all alone now." Darcy glanced down too. The two diggers were walking away. "Her son is with her." It was all the comfort he could offer. She turned back to him. "May I send someone with a few roses tomorrow?" "Of course. I ensured a bloom was on the coffin, and it remains there." "Thank you," she breathed. "When we were very little, We used to secretly pick flowers from people's gardens, and we always wanted the rosins. Rosins? And we always wanted the roses, but the thorns prevented us. So she'd like that. Darcy's lips twitched. You must tell me more about the time you knew each other. It sounds as if you were alike. If it would help Elizabeth to talk, then he'd be happy to listen. He offered his arm. Perhaps we ought to rejoin Georgiana. Georgiana. Perhaps we ought to rejoin Georgiana. She hesitated. I was wondering, does Georgiana know it was Sophia who died? Something she said made me think she thought it was a friend of mine, not your cousin as well. Then she appeared confused. The burial was at Matlock. Darcy nodded. I was concerned about it earlier, too. We need to make sure she knows. She walked beside him along the path. It was narrow, and they were very close. His heart started to pound, and he had to try to control his disordered breathing so she would not know. I suppose your cousin has guessed it was me that Sophia came to before she broke her engagement to you? Darcy shrugged slightly. He has, but we have not discussed it. He huffed a laugh. He didn't even know I had married the lady he'd met at Rosings until he read it in the papers, and we were safely away to Pemberley. Her eyebrows rose. I wonder why you didn't tell him. He nodded heavily. There is a difficult conversation we must have, Elizabeth, but today, or this week, or longer if you wish, is not the time. I must permit you time to grieve for your friend. Thank you, she murmured. First, we need to explain to Georgiana. Afterwards, I would like to climb Kinder Scout again. There is a place I wish to look at once more. He was puzzled. I don't recall you noticing any particular place, but we can certainly go. I found it when I went there while you were away, she explained. You went there on your own? Darcy was aghast. No, of course not. Her hand tightened on his arm. Mr. Reed and all the staff were there. I didn't even make them wait behind the coach. She stopped and turned to face him. Please don't be discomposed. You've been away, necessarily, a great deal, and I had much to think about. I was very safe. He breathed carefully. I will try not to be concerned, but I would... He shook his head. I could not imagine if I lost you. She squeezed his arm. And you haven't. Okay. Chapter 59. Save it off. And on we go. Gotta keep rolling. Chapter 60. While they were driving back to Pemberley, Elizabeth thought about what he'd said. It was a comfortable silence, and William had his hand firmly enclosing hers. His nearness was unsettling, and her heart beat unevenly in her bosom. She felt she was not honouring the memory of her friend by allowing him to touch her. You know when you run out of breath. I just yawned. She felt she was not honouring the memory of her friend by allowing him to touch her, and yet, if she drew her hand away, he might take... Come on. She felt she was not honouring the memory of her friend by allowing him to touch her, and yet, if she drew her hand away, he might take offence, and coldness would come between them. She felt she was not honouring the memory of her friend by allowing him to touch her, and yet, if she drew her hand away, he might take offence, and coldness would come between them again. She wouldn't be able to bear that. Another burp. She reached for her reticule with her free hand, trying to find the handkerchief, as a tear dripped down her chin. "Are you well?" He sounded concerned. She nodded, but kept her face down. "Let me help you." He reached for the bag and opened the strings for her to reach inside. She couldn't trust her voice to thank him, but when she patted her eyes, he put the bag down and drew her closer into an embrace. "It is a difficult day for you." She nodded. "I am just embarrassed you have seen it." "Why is that?" He sounded surprised. I would wish. "Why is that?" He sounded surprised. "I would wish I was stronger and able to grieve alone. I don't like appearing weak." "To me, it seems more of a weakness to be unable to show emotions to others." He huffed a quiet laugh. "As I said, it is a conversation we need to have on another day. But you gave me a great deal to think about at Hunsford, and I think failing to be able to share one's feelings might make one seem proud." They were nearly at Pemberley, so Elizabeth thought she ought not to continue a conversation like this. "I understand." She leaned back against his shoulder. "I would like to show you that place on Kinder Scout before we talk of it. Before we talk of it. I would like to show you that place on Kinder Scout before we talk of it." He nodded. "Tomorrow. I will take you there tomorrow if the weather is suitable." They climbed the steps of Pemberley, and as Elizabeth's maid assisted her out of her coat and hat, William turned to speak to his steward. Elizabeth watched him, suspecting he was giving instructions for their trip the next day. She turned to the housekeeper. "I expect you have arranged for tea." Mrs. Reynolds curtsied. She comes up so often, so seldom. Where are you, Mrs. Reynolds? "Very good, Mrs. Darcy. Very good, Mrs. Darcy." "Yes, Mrs. Darcy." "Thank you." Elizabeth turned and took William's arm, and they went through to the drawing-room. Georgiana jumped to her feet, looking from one to the other anxiously. Elizabeth laughed. "It is all right. Your brother has not chastised me for watching from a distance." "It is all right. Your brother has not chastised me for watching from a distance." The girl looked relieved. "I was wondering what you would say to me, William, if I had done it." "I wouldn't have had to, dear sister," he said imperturbably. "The thought would never have entered your head." Elizabeth laughed. "What he means is that you're far too ladylike, unlike me." He frowned slightly, and she gave him a teasing look until he relaxed and laughed. "Let's take tea." As soon as they were sitting down, Elizabeth reached over for Georgiana's hand. "I'd like to tell you about my friend. Will you come up to my sitting room when we have had our tea?" Georgiana glanced at her brother, and Elizabeth sipped her tea and looked at him over the rim of the teacup as she watched her sister trying to make sense of what was happening. So how did you find Elizabeth, William? Did you know where she was?" He shook his head. "No, I didn't even know she was no longer at Pemberley. It was the greatest good fortune that I recognised the Pemberley livery on the curricule." She was no longer at Pemberley. "It was the greatest good fortune that I recognised the Pemberley livery on the curricule as it passed us and was able to follow it." Elizabeth smiled at him. "It was my good fortune too. He was such a great comfort to me." She watched his face light up and turned to Georgiana. and turned to Georgiana. "If you've finished your tea, let's go upstairs. I am sure William has a large post waiting for him. He has been away so long." He chuckled. "Indeed. But I must first write to my uncle to say where I am." Up in her private sitting room, Elizabeth led Georgiana to the window seat where they could observe dusk as it crept over the park. She took the girl's hand in hers. "I think you know the name of my friend, don't you?" It was no good delaying the news any longer. Georgiana screwed up her nose. "This is how I know you are different from anyone else I've ever known." Her laugh was a little nervous. "No one else would just say it. They'd just go round in circles." "Would you prefer me to do that?" Elizabeth regarded her steadily. "No." Georgiana shook her head. "I suspect your friend was also my cousin Sophia. Why else would she be Why else would she be buried at Matlock?" "You are very astute, my sister." Elizabeth smiled. "But I expect you need an explanation." "Oh, yes," Georgiana breathed. "I don't understand. Are you the friend Sophia went to see before she told William she wouldn't marry him?" Elizabeth nodded, regarding her steadily. "She wanted my advice on how best to release your brother from his obligation without hurting him too much, and to Come on, do your job." "She wanted my advice on how best to release your brother from his obligation without hurting him too much, and to release him so he wouldn't follow her when she eloped with the man she had loved since she was 13. "Oh," Georgiana breathed. "I didn't know that." Elizabeth sat quietly while the girl thought for a few moments. "May I ask—" Georgiana hesitated. "Why did William insist on marrying you?" Elizabeth smiled. "I think I need to ask him how much I can tell you about that, and I don't think it is important to the story of how Sophia came to be in Newcastle." "What happened to her? Why was she in Newcastle and in trouble?" the girl whispered. "Her husband was angry that her fortune was not unencumbered, but tied up in a trust, and he was not kind to her." Elizabeth dabbed at her own eyes. "He left her there with nothing, and she became sick. I was glad to find out what had happened." "Were you with her when she—" Georgiana breathed. "You must be very strong." Elizabeth shook her head. "I was there, but I was too late to speak to her, and she was gone within a few minutes." If only Sophia had known to write directly to her at Pemberley, she would have been there much sooner. But it was her guilt to bear. She could not burden Georgiana with it. Tomorrow, she would climb Kinder Scout and feel cleansed by the wild winds. It would help. Okay. There's a lot of technical voice work going on with this project. It's lovely to have to use all of those technical skills. It's very satisfying, and to still be connected to the material. Okay, here we go. Chapter 61. Darcy sat on the edge of his bed as his valet cleared away. He waved him away when he came to turn the bed down. "I can manage, Mr. Maunder. Good night." "Good night, sir," the man murmured and closed the door quietly behind him. Darcy was too tired to think about moving. He was not certain whether Elizabeth needed or wanted him to be with her tonight. How long had it been since he had been at Pemberley? He frowned, thinking, It was nigh on 2 weeks ago that she had been furiously angry when he had disturbed her weeping in her apartment. So much had happened since then, he had almost forgotten. Perhaps these last few days had only been different because of her need for him after the loss of her friend. Alternatively, if he did not go to her, perhaps she would think he was rejecting her now they were back into the routine of life at Pemberley. As he sat there, thinking of his wife, the scent of lavender drifted round him, and he smiled faintly, even thinking her name even thinking her name evoked the perfume. But it remained as strong even after a few minutes, and he frowned. He stood up and turned to his bed. There was never a lavender scent in here, until today. He drew back the covers, and his heart twisted. There was a small, Elizabeth-shaped hollow in the bed, and her lavender fragrance was all about him. He drew a deep, shaky breath. She must have slept in here while he was gone, and his bounding heart was thankful. Without thought, he crossed the room towards the door to her chamber and opened it silently. She was sitting at the small table by her window, outlined against the darkness outside. He crossed the room and crouched beside her. "I don't wish to intrude tonight, if you want to be alone." She turned her head to his. "I would be happy with your company, but I'm afraid I wouldn't wish—" "I wouldn't impose myself upon you, Elizabeth." He hesitated and tried to keep the hint of laughter out of his voice. "I wasn't even decided whether I ought to speak to you or leave you in peace tonight, but there is an Elizabeth-shaped impression in my bed and the scent of lavender." Her hand covered her mouth. "I was going to smooth it out the night before you came home," she murmured. "I'm sorry, I ought not—" He placed his finger over her lips to stop her. "With all my goodly words," "with all my worldly goods I thee endow," he whispered. "I told you I intend to observe my marriage vows to the limit of my ability. If you wish to sleep in there tonight or in here, I will be with you." Darcy assisted Elizabeth out of the coach. When she reached back for her reticule, he frowned slightly. "Do you need everything in there, Elizabeth? Why not leave the heavy items on the coach? Or would you like Mr. Reed to carry them?" She shook her head. "It is not heavy." She seemed disinclined to share further, and he didn't like to ask. He glanced at the steep and stony path. There was no one else around to disturb them, and he was glad of it. He was very content. He was back at Pemberley, and Elizabeth was willing to have him near. He knew there were difficult conversations to have, but she seemed agreeable to undertake them, so he could be hopeful the situation would only improve. He loved watching her here, her enjoyment and— one thought. He loved watching her here, her enjoyment and her love of the wild peaks as great as his. She fitted here. She belonged at Pemberley just as much as he did. He loved watching her here, her enjoyment and love of the wild peaks as great as his. She fitted here. She belonged at Pemberley just as much as he did. He pulled his attention back to the current moment where she was waiting for him, looking up at the top of the peak, her face alight. He moved beside her. "You are impatient to be gone?" She laughed. "Certainly." She lifted the hem of her She lifted the hem of her skirt and began to climb eagerly. Darcy smiled and followed her, knowing she would sloon. Come on. Use your words, Rafe. Darcy smiled and followed her, knowing she would soon slow down a little. Behind him, he knew Mr. Reed and the gardener's boy would follow at a distance in case of need. As the path became steeper, he caught up with her and offered his arm without comment. She accepted it, still looking to the peak, and he picked his way along the rough stones at the edge of the path so she could walk the smoother route. Damn it. So she could walk the smoother route. At the top, she stopped and looked around, her breathing betraying the effort of climbing more than her features. She was not just the bravest woman he had ever known, but the most determined. Stubborn, my father would say. I beg your pardon. He looked at her, at the dancing amusement in her eyes. You were thinking I was very determined, she explained, and I said Papa called me stubborn. He chuckled. Miss... Stupid. I said Papa called me stubborn. He chuckled. I must be careful of my thoughts if you can read them so easily. No, that's weird. And I said Papa called me stubborn. He chuckled. I must be careful of my thoughts if you can read them so easily. She looked around, thinking, and then turned onto a path that took them to the left. As they walked along, her hand tightened on his arm. I have written to my father, she murmured, and he wrote back. He seemed pleased to be able to write. Darcy nodded. I am glad you wished to do so. His own heartbeat was erratic. He desired so much to clear the His own heartbeat. Come on. Words. His own heartbeat was erratic. He desired so much to clear the misunderstandings and errors of the past with her, but he was afraid of saying the wrong thing, and she had not yet had time to mourn the loss of her friend. She must feel guilty about it, as he did. If they talked about it together, perhaps they could help each other. He'd never been able to share before how he'd always had to bear. He'd never been able to share before how he'd always had to bear the burdens of others, but had no one really to talk to about his own troubles. He smiled. Richard was his best friend, but his manner of dealing with problems was to deny that he was troubled by them. She glanced at his face, her eyebrow arched, and he shook his head. It was a stray thought, but I am happy we have come here. The peaks are a good place to think. They were approaching the rocks where they'd sat back in June and talked about the requirements of his father's will. Was this where she'd choose to sit again? He fought not to flush with the memory of that one bittersweet night. But she walked past them and past several piles of loose rocks. He wanted to ask why she had taken the risk of walking this way when he wasn't here. Breathe. He wanted to ask why she had taken the risk of walking this way when he wasn't here, but dared not risk the apparent accord. He would speak to her about it later. Round the side of a small slope, and a new view opened up. He watched Elizabeth as her gaze swept the skyline. Her hand on his arm relaxed, and he understood how much these last days had cost her, even without apparent complaint. She sighed and began to look round the area before them. The way... Dry mouth. She sighed and began to look round the area before them, the wild and wind-swept plateaus stretching before them. There it is. She began to move towards a clump of bushes, and he was further bemused. She lifted her reticule, and his curiosity increased. As she drew out 2 small cushions, he could no longer contain himself and burst out laughing. He's laughing everywhere. Yeah. Be ready. As she drew out 2 small cushions, he could no longer contain himself and burst out laughing. She gave him a disdainful look. "If you think you can kneel on the stony ground for as long as I need you to, then you may," she announced. "I, however, remember the last time, and I will use a cushion." He shook his head. "And why did you need to kneel last time, Elizabeth?" "Well, I couldn't kneel," she admitted. "The stones are very sharp. But crouching is rather ungainly and not at all comfortable." She handed him a cushion. "If you don't wish to use it, you could hold it for me." She placed her own down beside a large rock with a small tree rooted in a fissure, and leaned on his arm as she lowered herself down. Pick that from that. And leaned on his arm as she lowered herself down to kneel on it. It seemed important to her, so he placed his cushion beside hers and knelt on one knee beside her, wondering if he looked as foolish to Mr. Reed as he felt. Chapter 62. "Thank you." Elizabeth touched his arm and felt the searing heat of his presence through her glove. "I appreciate your willingness to do." "I appreciate your willingness to do this for me." "Whatever you ask of me, I'll do." He glanced at the tree. "I will confess I don't know what I'm supposed to see." She huffed a little laugh and reached her hand out. "That I don't know." "I will confess that I don't know what I'm supposed to see." She huffed a little laugh and reached her hand out to trace her finger once again along the twisted branches. "Hello again," she murmured. Then she turned to her husband. "I'm beginning to wonder if I ought not explain. You might think I have taken leave of my senses." He smiled gently and placed his hand over hers. "And yet, something here meant so much to you that you wanted to share it with me. If you don't try, I might never understand." She looked back at the tree. "You're right. I came back here after we'd spoken back there on those rocks about the need to keep Pemberley." She lifted her gaze to his face. "And you had returned to London, and I came here and found this tree, and I was thinking." His eyes were on her face, warm and concerned and loving. She wanted to weep. Why hadn't she seen it in his expression before? "I thought the seed was blown here, into this little crack in the rock. The seedling had no choice as to where it grew, and has had no chance to change it." She stroked down the tiny trunk until her hand reached the edge of the crack in the rock. Yet it's grown. It's grown to the limits of what it could, where it has found itself. She looked back up at William, knowing there were tears in her eyes. "And I thought how selfish I was being, punishing you for bringing me here, where I can make a good life and learn to shape it, where I have found myself. And I can shape it far more than a tree can." and I can shape it far more than a tree can." William nodded quietly and lifted her hand to his lips. Then he bent closer to look at the tree. "Thank you for explaining." His smile was twisted. "I don't believe you have taken leave of your senses." He stood and stretched out a hand to assist her to her feet. He stood and stretched out a hand to assist her to her feet. She smiled at him and bent to retrieve the cushions. "Please don't think that's all we are going to talk about while we're here, William." His breath caught, as she'd hoped, and she reached her hand out to take his arm. "Look, there are some larger rocks we can sit on over there." She was happy they weren't the same rocks as when they'd discussed consummating their marriage, as she felt her face heating. His quiet chuckle told her he'd understood, and she tipped her chin up. She had things to say to him, and she wouldn't be diverted. "I think determined is a better word than stubborn," he murmured, and she couldn't stop her lips curving in a smile. A few steps later, and she turned with a mock smile. "Is the rock suitable, or would you like a cushion?" He bowed slightly, his lips twitching. "I am entirely at your service, madam." Elizabeth tossed her head and chose a rock. When he was sitting beside her, she reached out her hand to touch his arm. "Oh, piss. Did it not record? Oh, no, it's just in the wrong place. That's okay. I know there's a good bit coming, and I don't want to waste it." Hold on. There. Go back again. I've done it again. Okay, right, that's where I am. "I have a profound apology to make to you, although I'm not sure you would ever be able to forgive me." His hand covered hers, and his eyes blazed. "There is nothing I need for..." Excuse me. "There is nothing I need to forgive you for." She shook her head and looked down. "But there is, and I need you to know how sorry I am." Her heart twisted painfully within her. She had been proud of her attitude and disdainful of the feelings of those more wealthy, thinking they were looking down on her family. His hand squeezed hers. "I am here. You may take as long as you need." She blinked away the tears. It wouldn't help to seem to be asking forgiveness by foolishly weeping. This is so good, this bit. She lifted her head and stared out at the plateau. She wanted to whisper it, but the wind would whip away her words, and then she would have to repeat them. The heat of his hand on hers was distracting, and she smiled slightly and drew her hand away. She looked the length of the horizon, suddenly unsure where to start. A touch on her arm, and she jumped. "Let's walk a little." He drew her to her feet. "It can be easier to talk." Her hand tucked into his arm, he led the way along the path. Elizabeth berated herself. It was foolish to build this up to a great obstacle. "I don't know if you remember the time when I was staying at Netherfield when Jane was unwell." He chuckled. "I remember it very clearly." His gaze blazed down. "It was the time I began to realize I was in considerable danger from you." "Oh." She struggled to maintain her poise. "There was an evening there. We were talking about faults and other things." He nodded. It was one of the first conversations we had that led me to—" He stopped suddenly. She looked away. "I remember quite distinctly what I said to you." Her voice choked. "And now I'm guilty of it myself. It's not you. It's me. I was the one who said implacable resentment was a shade in a character, and here I've been thinking I would never forgive you." She wouldn't be able to stop crying now, she knew that. His arms enclosed her, and he drew her round to face him. "Elizabeth, my wife, I am here for you. You have been perfectly justified in your anger towards me. I was the one praying for the forgiveness I did not deserve, and you have done nothing to apologize for." She shook her head against his shoulder. "No, I'm sorry. It's a fault, one I said was a shade on a character, and I've been guilty of it." She looked up at his face. "I've made things so difficult for you, prevented you being happy." She rested her head back on his shoulder. "I wanted so much for you to come home so I could apologize to you and make amends." His breath hitched, and she hoped things would now be different. He'd been nothing but good to her since they'd been here. If she could forgive and forget his accusations, then she could make a new life here, for him, for his sister, and the new life within her. Warmth spread within her at the thought of him being able to... I don't know, I'm getting a bit teared up again. Let's just get control of that. You can't have the narrator upset. The characters can be upset. The narrator can't be upset. That's not the job. But it's why it's quite difficult when you're in the middle of a big emotional scene and you have to be able to dip back in and out. This is fine, but I've done some that have just taken forever because you have to hit the reset all the time. Anyway, here we go. Warmth spread within her at the thought of him being able to hold their child in his arms, of being assured of Pemberley. She thought of Flora, and then of Sophia, and her heart beat wildly. Would she be spared to enjoy life with a family, or might she have to pay the ultimate sacrifice too? She pushed the thought aside. There were many months yet before she needed to confront those fears. "Dearest Elizabeth." No. "Dearest Elizabeth." His murmur thrilled her. "It is I who have been worried about gaining your forgiveness. I said terrible things to you, and I could not expect you to I said terrible things to you, and I could not expect you to allow them to stand." She lifted her head to him. "Might we never talk of them again? May we begin again?" He touched his lips to her forehead. "There is one thing I said which I don't want you to forget." He looked a little anxious, and she hesitated, her heart in her mouth. He smiled. "I said I had to tell you how ardently I admire and love you." He let his head rest on hers. It was true then, and it is true now. She sighed happily to herself. It would all be perfect if the shadow of her friend was not between them. But the time was not right. She looked up. "Thank you. I feel quite differently about those words now than when I first heard them." Okay. Chapter 62. Chapter 62. Get rid of that. File and save. Okay. Oh God, I need a stretch. Crikey. Oh, tired. Long, long, long week. It's been a long, long week. Okay. Just make sure this is all laid out properly. Yes, it is. That's good. Okay, onward. Let's go. Chapter 63. Darcy sighed. Elizabeth, he murmured, knowing they must soon move from the peak. Thank you for making me the happiest of men. After a moment, he placed a finger under her chin and tipped her face towards his. I am as reluctant as you to leave this moment, but we ought to begin. Okay. I am as reluctant as you to leave this moment, but we ought to begin to make our way back to the coach. They have a hamper packed for us, he added temptingly. She laughed. And of course, a gentleman always has a prodigious appetite. He smiled wryly. I was hoping the exercise might improve yours, too. You have, understandably, had little inclination to eat well of late. Her hand tightened on his arm. A picnic is a wonderful idea. Thank you, William. As they picked the way down the slopes, he thought things were almost perfect. She had forgiven him his She had forgiven him his inexcusable behaviour of before their marriage, and she seemed to say she was willing to make a new life with him. She was even calling him by his given name. But she hadn't said she loved him, although she had received his declaration of love by saying she felt completely differently. By saying she felt completely differently on hearing it now. Perhaps it was too soon after the loss of her friend to expect them to be able to be entirely frank with one another. After all, he felt guilty because he could not regret his cousin breaking their engagement, which had freed him to marry Elizabeth. And, knowing Elizabeth as well as he did, she would be feeling guilty she'd allowed Sophia to elope with Wickham and hadn't prevented her. He wondered if she'd feel... He wondered if she'd feel she ought not to be glad now she... Ooh, that's a nice sentence. Let's do this. He wondered if she'd feel she ought not to be glad she'd now got the advantage of the marriage that she might think was rightfully that of her friend. He pushed the thoughts away. He would follow her lead on what she wished to say, but try to draw her back if she seemed to be too distressed by her thoughts. Later in the afternoon, the coach drew up outside the great doors of Pemberley, and he climbed out, turned, and assisted her down. I think you are probably ready to take tea. Her laugh warmed him through. I expect your redoubtable Mrs. Reynolds has it all arranged. Our Mrs. Reynolds, he corrected her. All we have is shared. Of course. She unaccountably looked a trifle shy, and they climbed the steps in silence. Once they had given their hats and coats to the staff, he accompanied her through to the drawing-room. Georgiana jumped to her feet. I hope you have had a good day. She curtsied at him and crossed the room to greet Elizabeth. Although I find it hard to understand your love of walking, especially up hills. Elizabeth laughed. It is perhaps a little odd, but the hills here are so dramatic compared to those of Hertfordshire. I need to see what is on the other side. He watched her as the maids brought in the tea. Happy, she seemed content for him to sit beside her on the sofa. Excuse me. Mrs. Reynolds entered the room and curtsied. Yes, Mrs. Reynolds? Excuse me, Mrs. No, that's not right. Go back to Mrs. Reynolds. Can't get her wrong. Be a nightmare. Very good, Mrs. Darcy. Very good, Mrs. Darcy. Very good, Mrs. Darcy. Yes, Mrs. Reynolds. Excuse me, Mrs. Darcy. A cart arrived with a number of trunks and parcels for you. I have had them removed to a storeroom while waiting for your instructions. Darcy watched Elizabeth's face light up, and she clapped softly. They've arrived. Oh, thank you, Mrs. Reynolds. Have them taken to my sitting room, if you please. I want to unpack them all myself. Yes, Mrs. Darcy. He watched the housekeeper leave the room, then turned back to Elizabeth. Her eyes were shining with delight, and he found himself smiling too. What has caused such joy, Elizabeth? Oh, they are my things from Longbourn. She clasped her hands to her. It has been such a long time since I've seen them, but Jane agreed to pack them up and send them. I can't be more pleased. Darcy frowned. Why were they not sent with us when we drove here? She turned to him. We came straight from Gracechurch Street, and I only had with me what I took to Kent. All the rest of my things remained at Longbourn, and, of course, Mamma wanted to throw them away, thinking I wouldn't want them any more, so I asked Jane to make sure they were safe. But it's been 4 months. Darcy was troubled. Why did they not come sooner? She touched his hand. Don't be discomposed. My pin money is exceptionally generous, but I could only economize so much, so I couldn't send to Jane before now. Elizabeth, he expostulated. Why hadn't I thought of it? You ought to have asked. It is not the sort of thing you need to use pin money to pay for. I've failed her again, not thinking she was here among strangers and had not even the comfort of her own possessions. Her eyes flashed. There is nothing I needed so very much. Her hands went to her mouth, and she tried to hide her laughter. That is why I must, That is why I must unpack it myself. There is a stick. A stick? He was mystified. A stick, she confirmed. Do you want to hear about the stick? I'm curious about the stick, Georgiana said, her amusement evident. Elizabeth settled herself back on the sofa. It is one of my very earliest memories. I was 4 years old. She glanced at him out of the corner of her eye. Papa said I was already very stubborn, and I think our poor nursemaid would have agreed. She had taken us, Jane and me, for a walk. In the woods I discovered this enormous log. At least it was enormous to my childhood imagination. Nothing would satisfy me until they had helped me to stand it up beside me. She beamed at his sister. Of course, once I had discovered it was exactly the same height as I was, then it had to be mine, and I insisted on dragging it home. Nothing would convince me to leave it behind, and I would not permit either Betsy or my sister to assist me. She smiled pensively. It took a long time, but now, of course, I can see it as a very ordinary stick, rather dried out and crumbly. I used to take it everywhere, even when I went to stay at my aunt's in London. She sighed. Going to Kent was the first time I had ever left it behind. Darcy reached for her hand. I wish I'd thought to ask you what remained behind. She jumped to her feet. There was no reason for you to have done so. In fact, I believe my own father ought to have thought of it. His 30 pieces of silver would have included enough to pay for it. She stopped suddenly. The flash in her eyes died. I'm sorry. That was uncalled for now. She smiled, although it seemed forced. Perhaps you will excuse me, William, Georgiana. I would like to go and investigate what is in my parcels. Darcy rose to his feet. I would by no means suspend any pleasure of yours. He watched as she left the room. Real forgiveness might take her longer than she thinks. William? His sister's voice was timid. What did she mean by it? Darcy wiped his brow. He must think. I haven't heard her mention it before, Georgiana, so I cannot say. He smiled. I hope she can enjoy unpacking her belongings. His sister smiled. I think the story of the stick was to distract your attention from what was said before. I thought so too. He needed to think about that before he spoke to Elizabeth again. Georgiana reached for her needlework. I know you have a lot of business, dear brother. I will be quite all right here. He bowed. If you are sure. He would write to Richard and send to London with instructions for Mr. Lee. Wickham's debts must be purchased and the man detained as soon as he could be found. He might not stand trial for what he did to Cousin Sophia, but he was determined justice be served, and he must add further money to Elizabeth's account. Okay. 2.5 past. Probably got another half an hour or so in me, I think. Yeah, okay. Take a second. Okay, here we go. Chapter 64. Elizabeth was surrounded by carefully wrapped items when there was a quiet knock on her sitting-room door. Enter. Georgiana peeked round it. I don't want to be in... I don't want to intrude, Elizabeth, but sometimes it can be fun to share what you are unwrapping. If you'd like, I can sit with you. You are very welcome. Elizabeth cleared a place on the sofa beside her, although you'll probably not think anything is very exciting. I am eager to see the stick, Georgiana laughed. It must be wonderful to have such clear memories of exciting things in childhood. Elizabeth laughed. Jane knows how precious the memory is to me, and I expect it will be wrapped in my clothes and well protected right in the middle of the largest trunk, so I might begin with that one. She dropped to her knees beside the battered old trunk. You've mentioned Jane before. Georgiana looked diffident. Is she your eldest sister? Yes, Elizabeth sighed. We were the closest... We were the closest that two people could ever be. She laughed softly. No one looking at us would realize we are sisters. She has hair as fair as yours, and is the most beautiful lady I've ever seen, and just as lovely on the inside. She had opened the large trunk and pushed aside the first layer of paper. You see how carefully she has packed it. And some dried flowers from the garden at home. Her voice choked a little. I wish I'd had the opportunity to meet her, and all your family. Georgiana sounded troubled. I hope you will, Elizabeth said. Don't be troubled, Georgiana. I am happy. Perhaps it's good I had to wait for my things to arrive. Had they come earlier, I would have been far more homesick. Georgiana smiled diffidently. I've never been to Hertfordshire. Elizabeth glanced up at her. I hope you'll be able to call with me one day. She hesitated. Your brother stayed there with his friend Mr. Bingley last year. Did you not wish to accompany him? Georgiana shook her head. I did not. She shivered. I could not bear to watch Miss Bingley pursuing William. I was always afraid she would somehow manage to compromise him and force his marriage. Elizabeth laughed. Well, that fear cannot be valid now he is married. Well, that fear cannot be valid now he is married, so perhaps we can go and you'll be happier. It was her turn to hesitate. Do you know Mr. Bingley's sisters have ambitions for him to marry you? Georgiana nodded. It is another reason I didn't wish to go with William last year. Miss Bingley in particular makes it very obvious. Are you not fond of him? He's a very amiable, pleasant man. Or is it because he is from trade? Elizabeth wondered whether it was Georgiana's wish or her brother's. Oh, I don't really know. Georgiana screwed up her nose. I think I want to meet someone who... Oh, I don't know. He is an amiable man, but I don't feel anything for him. She bit her lower lip. And I would dread having Miss Bingley as my sister. Elizabeth sat back on her heels and laughed. That is a very good thought. She looked under her lashes at Georgiana. I am glad you don't feel affection for him. I can now tell you he has been enamoured of my sister, and her affections are deeply stirred by him. But... There was a bit of noise there. Been enamoured of my sister, and her affections are deeply stirred by him, but... She turned her attention back to the trunk and pushed aside a further layer of wrappings. He calls on her, talks to her, and despite this has not offered for her. She is saddened by it and despairing. She took out a few of her old dresses. If he did, she would be so happy, and that is what I want for her above all else. But it would make Miss Bingley my sister. Georgiana laughed. I cannot see her intimidating you, Elizabeth. But I know Mr. Bingley might want advice before he does anything. He asked my brother about the merits of Netherfield Park before he took it. Did he? It sounded a bit throwaway. Asked my brother about the merits of Netherfield Park before he took it. Did he? Elizabeth looked at her dresses. I suppose these aren't really suitable now I have new ones. She stood up and laid them on the bed. I'll keep them in the closet. It might make it look a little fuller. There is more empty space than gowns. We could go to Derby again. The girl sounded hopeful. I enjoyed going to the modiste with you, and you'll need a full set of winter gowns and a heavier coat. It can be very cold here. It's a good idea. Elizabeth rummaged in the trunk again. She wondered how she'd be able to talk to the seamstress privately and arrange clothes which would expand as much as she needed without alerting Georgiana. Perhaps she ought to tell William soon. No, if he knew, he would not permit her to climb the peaks or walk round the park any more. She wouldn't tell him until she had to. But perhaps we could wait until the farmers have given their opinion on how cold they think the weather will get this winter. Georgiana was looking into the trunk. Oh, is that the stick? Elizabeth lifted the rolled coat. I believe so. She carried the garment over to her bed and carefully unrolled it to reveal the stick. There. You may now... There. Now, you may now. There. You may now officially think of me as a silly, emotional fool. I'd never think that. Georgiana's earnest tone drew Elizabeth's attention. Don't take any notice of me, dear Georgiana. I have a habit of teasing, that's all. Georgiana stood up. Perhaps I'll go back downstairs, Elizabeth, and leave you to enjoy your explorations in peace. Whatever you wish. Elizabeth glanced at her. I'm happy for your company, but equally so if not. I've thought of something I need to do. Georgiana went to the door. I'm glad to have seen the stick. Elizabeth laughed. It's very ordinary, really, but the memory is so sweet. No, there's no so. It's very ordinary, really, but the memory is sweet. Okay, and again. Just out of interest, how much have we got left here? Probably about 20% maybe? Maybe just under 20%. Yeah, this is going to be quite a long one, isn't it? 12-something hours, probably. Okay, I've got to keep going then. Got to keep going. Really, but the memory is sweet. Chapter 65. Darcy was just finishing his list of instructions to Richard when there was a knock at the door. Enter. Right, this is the footman, isn't it? Okay. I beg your pardon, Mr. Darcy, but Miss Darcy wishes to speak to you. Darcy turned the letter over. He didn't wish Georgiana to see the name Wickham, even by chance. Of course. Is she content? Of course. Is she content to come in here? Georgiana hurried in and waited until the door shut behind the footman. Darcy frowned. What is amiss? He rose to his feet and drew her over to the chairs by the fireplace. What has happened? He looked at the door. What has happened? He looked at the door. Is Elizabeth? No. She gave a watery smile. Well, it is about her, but it's not bad. Just some way I think you maybe needed to help. He sat opposite and took her hand. Please tell me at once. She smiled. I went up to her sitting room and asked if she wanted an audience while she was unwrapping her things from home. She was happy about it and we were talking. Darcy tried not to smile. Did you see the stick? She nodded. But it's not about that. We were talking about her home and her sister because I wanted to find out about them. She drew a deep breath. Did you know there is affection between the oldest sister and Mr. Bingley? He couldn't smile. I do. I wrote to Bingley back in, he thought back, early May, I think it was, and encouraged him to return to Netherfield. He looked at her. Have they become engaged? Is Elizabeth pleased about it? She shook her head. No, she seems downcast about the whole business. He's calling at their home regularly, but Elizabeth and her sister think he... But Elizabeth and her sister think as he hasn't yet made an offer, he might not have any intention of doing so. She looked at him appealingly. But you and I both know he will not be able to make up his mind about anything, especially if his sister is trying to discourage him. And you think it might assist if I wrote to him and encouraged him to make her an offer if he wishes to? Darcy smiled wryly. Oh, would you? She breathed. I think it would be wonderful. Darcy bent a stern eye on her. It is not the sort of thing one ought to do. If I did so, Elizabeth might see it as officious interference. He could not do this. No, I won't say a word. She jumped up and dropped a kiss on his cheek. Thank you. You're the best brother in the world. Don't believe you there, Georgiana. Let's try that again. Thank you. You're the best brother in the world. He watched her leave the room and shook his head. He hadn't said he would write, and however was he to word a letter like that? The butler knocked and carried in a sheaf of letters on a silver tray. Right, have we got a Pemberley butler? Excuse me. Butler. We don't have a butler Pemberley. Which means it will be the same as... Is it the same as this one? Mr. Darcy, Colonel Fitzwilliam. No, it's not. I know who it is, though, because I just listened to that one. Carried in a sheaf of letters on a silver tray. The post, Mr. Darcy. Perhaps he could put off the task until he'd had time to think a little. Perhaps there was another way. He leafed absently through the letters. His eyebrows went up. One was directed in Bingley's untidy scrawl. He broke the seal. Darcy, I hope this letter finds you well and you are enjoying married life. I am writing in haste to ask for your advice, because it was you who suggested I return to Netherfield. It has been wonderful, but terrible at the same time. Darcy, I am so in love with Miss Bennet. There, I have written what I dare not say to her. Caroline has been quite insistent that I cannot make my dear Miss Bennet an offer, and she says it would not be received with pleasure. I am downcast at the thought, but my sister may be right. Over the last few weeks, Miss Bennet seems to be noticeably cooler towards me. Oh, damn. I should have turned that off. It's all right. Turn it off now. There we go. There. Over the last few weeks, Miss Bennet seems to be noticeably cooler towards me, although she is always polite. If I offer for her and she refuses me, then how will I... Yep. If I offer for her and she refuses me, then how will I be able to live, not seeing her or being able to call on her any more? I don't know what to do, my friend. Do you have some words of advice for me? After all, you told me to return to Netherfield and confessed you had been wrong in not informing me when she was in town. I hope you may yet advise me. Yours, etc., Bingley. Darcy laughed and dropped the letter on the table. He could answer that with more equanimity than he felt about giving unsolicited advice. He rose and woke. He rose and woke the Swedish chef. He rose and went to the writing desk. Desk. He rose and went to the writing desk. An express would arrive there on Saturday. Next week, Elizabeth might hear joyful news from her sister. Bingley, for goodness sake, man, if you have been calling on Miss Bennet since the middle of May and have not yet made her an offer, I am not surprised if she is in despair that you do not intend to do so. If you feel you wish to make... If you feel you may wish... No, if you feel... It's that breath I don't like. If you feel you wish to make her your bride, then you ought to appraise her of your feelings at once. You are of a You are of a more romantic disposition than I, and I am certain you will be able to convince her of your devotion if you act before she perhaps decides to escape the situation and stay with relations. So we two will be brothers. I think it would be a very good thing. Please ignore the advice of your sister. I am sure she is ambitious for you, but perhaps she has... But perhaps she has forgotten that Miss Bennet is sister to the new Mrs. Darcy, and is therefore very eligible. Yours, etc., Darcy. He read it through quickly and hastily sealed it before finishing Richard's letter and ringing for the butler. He handed them both over. Please get these taken to the post at Lambton at once, Mr. Payne. They are to go express. The man bowed. Yes, Mr. Darcy. Darcy glanced at the clock. He had just time to tell Georgiana what had happened before he needed to change for dinner. Tiredness. His other letters could wait. Right, flubbing on things like that means I think it's time to call it a day. So it's time to call it a day. That's the end of the week. Another week. I am going to take some of the other videos down. Obviously, we can't have all of the things on all of the time because we can't have everyone coming and listening to the whole book. Yada, 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 and it breaks terms and conditions, stuff like that. But I will be back on Monday. So this one will stay up all weekend, and we will go from there. As I say, if you got this far, like, subscribe, do all that stuff. longlistenlibrary.com. That's where you can find all the big audiobook complete box sets for just £1. Oh my God, it's so good. Longlistenlibrary.com if you like that. We will be back. You can ask any questions in the comments if you need to. I will get back to you at some point and either address them in the comments, or we can have a chat. I'll have a chat in the next video. Have a great time and see you next time. Bye now.